Hello, welcome to the AI Edge podcast. We're here to help marketing professionals stay on the cutting edge of AI news and its impact on marketing and advertising. I'm Shiv, founder and CEO of U of Digital. Today with me, I have my fearless co-host, Myles Younger.
Hey, everybody.
And we have a very special guest, Andrew Lipsman. Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Shiv. Myles, great to be here. I'm an independent analyst and consultant at Media, Ads, and Commerce.
Awesome. Yeah, we're going to be talking a lot of media, ads, and especially commerce today. So really excited you're here with us. So let's kick things off with one of the big stories of the week, which was Disney made a $1 billion investment in OpenAI. And as part of that deal, they are allowing OpenAI to basically license 200 plus Disney characters to be used in products like Sora and in ChatGPT image generator. So for example, I could go to ChatGPT and say, make me a video of Mickey Mouse skiing down a mountain. And Sora would generate that video with Mickey Mouse skiing down a mountain, right? And up until now, there were copyright issues around that kind of thing. And Disney is basically saying, hey, ChatGPT is allowed to do this. It's interesting because Disney is investing in OpenAI. That was the headline. Meanwhile, OpenAI is able to use Disney's IP. I would imagine there's some other parts of the deal that we're not completely getting the clear angle on of, something is going back to Disney in some shape or form, or maybe they're getting more equity in the company than $1 billion would account for because they're giving their IP to OpenAI. So I'd imagine there's some other things there. Another kind of part of this news, which is interesting, is this is Disney's first ever IP licensing deal with any AI company, and they're actually suing Google and Gemini simultaneously for copyright infringement. So a lot going on here. Obviously, a lot of implications. Obviously, there's this whole idea of like publishers and their control of their IP versus playing nice with AI and the monetization angle of it. Do you require that monetization? What does that look like? How do you do it? So this news kind of brings all of that to the fore. So very interesting. I'd love to get your take. We'll start with you, Andrew. What do you think about this?
Yeah, well, I think, first things first, you're right that we don't know the terms of the deal. This came up with when Walmart implemented instant checkout. My assumption there was, you're potentially giving up your data, but they're probably getting a sweetheart deal in some way. I assume if you're Walmart, if you're Disney, something like that is true. But I think the biggest rationale for Disney at the end of the day is IP is their business. That is the fundamental thing, and they're actually at the most risk because of their target market of AI kind of running away with their IP and doing bad things to it. So they need to take control of it. And this actually is an interesting way of taking control where you loosen the reins a little bit, but you're putting guardrails into how that the AI can actually be used with your IP. I think it's pretty smart. And then, obviously Disney's business has seen better days. So in the short run, being able to get that high margin revenue probably helps smooth things out for them over the near term.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I was reading a few different articles about this. I think Disney does not have a lot of cash on hand, and they've never made an investment to this level. And so it kind of speaks a little bit to the strategic aspect of this, but also maybe the desperation aspect of this. And I think that's an interesting thing to unpack. Myles, what do you think?
My head immediately went to what Andrew just brought up is the idea of guardrails of having some kind of protections around or control over how Disney's IP is used, and I'll be really curious how that's being built into the relationship and built into the specific character formats that are being offered, because clearly OpenAI is not going to allow its users to have total carte blanche in how they would use Disney IP, because people will do awful things with this and they will ruin Mickey Mouse. They will just ruin Disney for all of us. And that clearly is going to happen if Disney doesn't forge these kind of partnerships. But even when Disney does, it begs the question, exactly what will the kind of formats be? What are the tools and sort of the creative palette that's going to be given to ChatGPT users? That's going to be super fascinating, because that's going to start to define how existing entertainment IP takes shape and comes to life in AI. Like, we just don't know how that's going to happen yet.
Yeah.
There was an interesting opportunity a couple of years ago that somebody had brought up. This is when Cameo got really hot, about a potential business for Disney where you could basically have like Cameo versions of these characters, wishing kids happy birthday. And I was like, oh, that's an incredible business for Disney. Of course they should do something like that. It was just sitting there for the taking, and they didn't. And at the time I was like, wow, they really have constraints around their IP. So it's interesting here that this kind of marks a shift, and maybe I would say it's time for them to revisit that potential business, because I think it's a good one for them.
Yeah. It's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out. And, I think like it's interesting to think about the big picture kind of strategic implications for AI and, owners of IP, and like, companies like Disney set the precedent. This is a precedent, right, for other publishers for how to act and how to treat their IP. Again, like Andrew, you just said this, Disney has some of the most valuable IP in the world, and they are playing ball with AI. Like, I wonder if this is a catalyst in a way for a lot of publishers to kind of run at the AI thing and open up the floodgates. And so we'll see how it all plays out. Like, do you have any, like, what should publishers or owners of IP, what should they be doing? Like, any advice, or like how should they be looking at this kind of this strategic decision or fork in the road?
I think that they should be religious about their IP and protect it as much as possible, but be willing to play offense and play ball when it makes sense for you. So it really is towing that line, but I think they should default to protecting it as best they can.
Cool. All right, let's move on to the next story. So a company called Criteo, which is one of the largest commerce media ad tech platforms in the industry. They basically sit between retailers and advertisers. They run ads for brands to drive commerce outcomes. Criteo, there was a story that came out that Criteo is now starting to use their commerce data. So they've amassed a ton of commerce data over the years, right, by working with retailers, by working with brands. And so the news was that Criteo is going to start piping in their commerce data into an unnamed LLM. It's interesting that it's very much an unnamed LLM as of now. And the idea behind this would be that if you're in that LLM and you're asking for shopping recommendations, so hey, what should I buy? I'm looking for a new laptop. Hey, I want the comfiest socks ever for my grandma. Whatever you're looking for, Criteo's data would power some of those recommendations, because again, like, the idea is the data that AI has just by scraping the open web isn't enough. Meanwhile, a company, with Criteo's data heft has a lot more to offer. The other aspect of this news that I thought was really interesting, but it was just kind of like a throwaway sentence at the end, was eventually Criteo could also use that data in AI chatbots or LLMs to power shopping ads. So if I'm asking the LLM, hey, recommend a laptop for me to buy, there's the organic kind of answer, but then, eventually you might see the ad tiles or whatever. We don't know what it's going to look like yet, but you might see the advertising in the AI, and maybe Criteo could power that. So it's an interesting, I think, direction for Criteo, which has very much been a media tech platform for commerce. Now they're getting into this AI infrastructure or AI data play. And I think it's a very interesting thing for AI, right? Because AI, I think, is kind of coming to the table and saying, we are hungry for data. We need more data to do a better job, especially around shopping, around agentic commerce. So let's start, Myles, with you this time. What do you make of this?
I just immediately think about the fact that these LLMs don't want to go chasing all of the world's millions of businesses to get each of their data respectively. Scrape every single website, every single data feed, ingest every single little independent product feed. I would assume they would much rather forge partnerships with centralized platforms that can guarantee, probably in part of the partnership agreement, a certain level of data quality. And then as these LLMs evolve and shoppers get more sort of sophisticated or mature with their shopping or browsing or research behaviors on LLMs, and the LLMs discover like, oh, people are we need this new piece of data from you. Like the classic sort of, SKU level flat file of data is no longer going to cut it. Our users are, really wanting to get a, more of a tangible sense of the thing that they're shopping for. And so we need these new pieces of data. Again, it's going to be easier for them to go to the Criteos of the world and ask for that data, because then Criteo can go out and, take on the hard work of getting all that data from all of its whatever, merchant clients, partners. And so that's what I think about is just, they're just being kind of fewer necks to choke for the LLMs, as it were.
Yeah, makes sense. Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with the efficiency argument there. Going back to the Walmart deal that I alluded to before, there's this assumption to think that the data just flows one way, but if you have enough market power, in all likelihood, the deal has some sort of two-way data transfer, right? So you were mentioning the potential for Criteo to take in this data to power better retail media advertising. The big issue, though, that I think this whole thing hinges on is whose data is that, right? Criteo is working on behalf of lots of retailers and RMNs, and I'm a big believer that, if you're a retailer, that first-party data is your most precious asset, especially in this space. So do you want an intermediary being the one who's monetizing your data? I think it starts to, bring up some really interesting tension points. And I would say this: I'm broadly guiding retailers and RMNs to take back ownership of your data. I think there's been a bad trend where they've been letting it bleed out and letting intermediaries effectively disintermediate them, and they should stop doing that. So this is potentially a chance of that happening really at scale for the industry. Certainly would be good for Criteo, but I think that it should give all the retailers pause in terms of how their data is being used, or are they sharing in the value creation?
Andrew, I have a follow-up question for you.
Yeah.
So Shiv mentioned that it's an as yet unnamed LLM is maybe setting up this partnership with Criteo. Any thoughts as strategically? What is this? Do you think it might be Gemini? Do you think it might be ChatGPT? Those are honestly the two top.
Oh, I mean, listen, normally you would just assume ChatGPT, because a big part of what they're doing is it's about the headlines as much as it is about the long-term utility. But Criteo just inked a big deal with Google. So if you ask me to choose between the two, I think it's probably Gemini.
Okay. All right.
Which is interesting, right? Because Criteo is also a fierce competitor of Google's in a lot of ways, right? Andrew, I really like what you said there, because, in the AI era, data is extremely valuable, and everyone is thinking about that. And it like, in ad tech, let's say for the last 10, 15, 20 years, like data leakage and data bleeding and like kind of the ad tech industrial complex has soaked up so much data, and that's how it's kind of grown. But AI accelerates all that and makes that potentially way worse for retailers, for publishers. We just talked about Disney and their IP. We're talking now about retail. It just makes it way, way, way worse. And if you're a retailer in the past, if you're working with Criteo, you're already a little worried about your data kind of maybe going into a co-op, and how do my competitors use it or what have you. But now all of a sudden, if you're putting your data into Criteo, you have to worry about Criteo partnering with an AI, which then cannibalizes, your relationship with the customer. It cannibalizes your own advertising business potentially. There's so much downstream negative potential impact there, and that's something people have to think about,
And if you're an RMN, you probably don't have as robust of a sales force as a lot of these platforms do. Now here's the problem with feeding them all your data. They then can take their sales forces and go out and sell that inventory at a lower price. I mean, I hear about this all the time from especially CPG advertisers, that they always say, like, why am I going to buy, Facebook ads through an RMN if I can just buy it through Facebook? I can get the same inventory. And so Meta, like, why would you plug in if you're an RMN and give that data to Meta? Because you know that they're going to be able to go out and sell it better and also be able to generate, better return on ad spend and all the things that ultimately drive advertiser spend. So you need to be able to maintain the premium on your buy, and you're not going to be able to compete with the platforms.
You're saying as an advertiser... Sorry, go ahead, Myles.
I was going to jump in with the cynical take here is that, if merchants, retailers, advertisers haven't woken up to the first-party data leakage problem over the last like 15 or 20 years, it does make me question whether they'll actually wake up to it this time, or will just repeat the cycle where they will trade data for access to shoppers and scale.
I agree. That's probably what will happen. It's what should happen versus what will happen.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So guys, let's segue. And everything. I love this podcast already, this episode, because everything here ties together so nicely. So the next couple of hits I wanted to get into. One was Shopify enabled something called Agentic Storefronts. So I think the idea behind this is all of the merchants that use Shopify can now kind of like hit an easy button, and all of their product data, their product feeds, all of that information just gets auto-syndicated out to the major LLMs for agentic commerce, agentic shopping purposes, right? And then there was another company called Inflow Payments, which now enables AI agents to shop on behalf of customers and actually complete credit card transactions. So the idea is, as a consumer, you would log into Inflow Payments once, authenticate, give your credit card information, and then Inflow Payments would enable agents to shop on your behalf, and kind of end-to-end shopping, right? Not just discovery, not just comparison, but also completing the purchase through a credit card. And so there's a lot happening. We don't have to get into those things, but there's a reason I brought up those two news stories, is because I want to get to kind of the big meaty part of this episode, which is talking about agentic commerce. So for our listeners, just so everybody knows, Andrew published an awesome blog post a while back just talking about how agentic commerce is a collective hallucination, I believe was the title. Also, Eric Seufert from Mobile Dev Memo published something called Agentic Commerce is a Mirage. Miles Younger published kind of a response to those blog posts saying, I think agentic commerce is very real, right? So I wanted to kind of bring you on, Andrew, to this podcast and talk through this a little bit, talk through is agentic commerce real, is it not, why or why not, and just go through some of the nuances of it. So I want to kick things off with the semantic discussion, because I think like in reading these blog posts, and I encourage everybody who's listening to this podcast, go and read the blog posts. They are really interesting. I think everybody makes really good, valid points. But I think semantics really matter, right? So I want to just ask you guys, what does agentic commerce mean? I'll just leave it at that. What does agentic commerce mean to you? Andrew, let's start with you.
I'm glad we're starting here, because I think it's very easy for folks to have two very different interpretations and completely talk past each other. And I'm much more interested in netting out somewhere constructive, and I think that we need to at least come close to having a similar definition. Now, for me, the first time it was ever presented to me was by a real agentic AI expert. This was back in late 2024. And it was presented as basically you type in a prompt, and then an agent will go and do all these different things along the path to purchase and make the purchase for you, and you don't have to do anything. So the first time it was ever presented to me was as this kind of end-to-end definition of commerce. The debate since then, I think, has largely, at least the debate I've seen, has largely been around that same idea of end-to-end. Now, I've been willing to come off of that sort of requirement that it be fully end-to-end, and you can allow for maybe some human intervention in the process. But I think that when I hear the word agentic, there has to be agency, there has to be autonomy, and ultimately multiple steps of this process on the path to purchase have to be happening with the agent making decisions on your behalf. So that's what I don't need to be ideological about it, but I do think there has to be a level of autonomy. Otherwise, to me, if you just break down the path to purchase into its component parts, we already have all the component parts in some form, in fashion, or some form or fashion. They just haven't really been integrated in that full, more complete process.
Yep. Okay. Andrew, sorry, Miles, I'm not going to you yet. I'm still, I'm taking the mic back for a second here. Andrew, I'm gonna counter, and say, like, I do believe, full agency, like, like I think agentic commerce eventually should be an end-to-end thing, right? But I think, like every technology that changes how we do things, like there are baby steps along the way to change how we do things. So from my perspective, agentic commerce is starting to change how we shop in certain areas. So I'll give you like just a very personal example, and I'd love to hear like, I thought it was interesting that Eric brought up like, hey, I don't shop for airline tickets in this way. And so agentic commerce is a Mirage. And that made me think like, well, sure, I agree with you, Eric. I don't also shop for airline tickets in that way, but there are other people that may. And also, I shop for some other things in other ways that are more agentic. So I'll give you an example. I was looking for a Chromebook for my son. He's 5. And I was looking for a Chromebook for Christmas. So I went through this process. I thought about how I would have done this in the past. In the past, I would have thought like, okay, I want a laptop that's durable. I want the one that's cheap. And I want one that has a touch screen. Those are the only things I cared about, right, as I was going through this process. So I immediately pulled up ChatGPT, and I said, these are the things I'm looking for. Find me deals, look for these parameters, and give me a list and a comparison table. And it did a pretty good job, and ultimately I picked the Chromebook that ChatGPT recommended to me from a retail outlet that it recommended to me as having the lowest price. And I went and bought it myself. ChatGPT didn't buy it for me. I then clicked out, went and bought it myself. So that part of it wasn't agentic. But the first part of it was extremely agentic. And I was thinking about, after I went through that process, if I was to do this myself, there would be a lot of human decision making that I'd be going through that the agent now did for me and made it a lot easier and faster. Like, for example, I wouldn't even know. I would go look at review sites. I'd probably go look at multiple review sites that then sort by price, sort by durability, sort by touchscreen. I would do some like manual stuff myself, maybe create a table and not feel too great about it and spend a ton of time, right? And so I felt like the agent did a lot of kind of probabilistic reasoning and curation of information that made it agentic in a way. So like, would you define that as an agentic experience or not?
I wouldn't quite. I think that
Okay.
you're to me that's AI assisted shopping. AI, and first off, I think a lot of people think I'm very anti AI in terms of influencing the path to purchase. I actually did some research where I surfaced some really interesting data on AI search adoption, and among early adopters, defined by those who were using AI search at the end of 2024, their share of search between AI search and traditional search went from 8% to 39%. Mm-hmm. And wow. Yeah, huge, right? And then I looked at other cohorts after that, and I said, well, is it just this early adopter cohort that's moving like this, or is it later cohorts too? Not quite as steep of a slope, but a lot of them were seeing similar shifts. But it's mostly incremental search behavior. So one, absolutely, it is changing the way that we search. My bigger counter argument to your point, though, is I can go on a site today, and if I know what my specific specs are on searching for a laptop or Chromebook or whatever, I can actually filter by those things today. Or I can just do a search on a site and get the list of best options. And then the comparison shopping component already exists. There's comparison shopping engines that exist today. So it's 2 steps. You're saying it basically creates an efficiency of 1 step. And what I'm arguing ultimately is like, yeah, it's a little efficiency there maybe. But is it that big of an efficiency? I don't know. I actually kind of like to have my hands on the control on each step of the process. It has to be a big enough efficiency for me to really buy into the behavior change that consumers are going to have. Okay. I've also seen it fail a lot of times. Sure. I don't know if you guys are going to CES, but I was trying to find a hotel room at CES, and everything is $900 or above. So I was like, find me a decent room, $500 or less. That it doesn't need to be right near the source of the action. I'll pay extra for cabs to get from place to place. I don't care. And it gave me the worst options possible. And then I went to hotels. Yeah, and then I went to hotels.com and I searched and I discovered these like Airbnb type apartments in the Vidara, like right in the center of the action for under $500. I was like, okay, well, hotels.com, this is what they've been doing forever. They found me this like diamond in the rough, and ChatGPT wasn't finding it.
I kind of wish you were staying at the Golden Nugget because ChatGPT made you.
Right.
That'd be fun. That'd be a great story. Myles, what do you think?
I mean, the example about looking for CES accommodations, that's a great one. I mean, that really speaks to how it's probably going to matter a lot that some of these use cases, whether you call them agentic commerce or something else, are probably going to get highly verticalized. Because like ChatGPT, in your case, didn't necessarily know where it mattered to look. Like Hotels.com kind of knows more about where it matters to look. You yourself have a better sense of where it matters to look than ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is still just this like Swiss Army knife trying to be all things to all people, and it kind of like gets most things mostly right. But then if you have like a really specific task or something really fairly specific you need to buy or book, it tends to fall flat. And I mean, that just made me think of our previous discussion around the need for high quality data sources for things that one might search for and buy, and how that could very well change over the next, I don't know, year or two. I'm certainly not shocked that none of this stuff particularly works very well, and yet it's still quite new. But like Google made some of its agentic commerce announcements a few weeks ago, a month or two ago, and one of the things that they had announced was some features that would watch for the price you wanted. So you'll set a price that you want for something, it'll watch for you, and then either it will do it now or maybe next year or the next year after that. It'll consummate the transaction based on your instructions. And so the case that you just sort of outlined is like, well, if I know far enough advance I'm going to make a trip and I have like a price I'm trying to hit, it would be kind of convenient to have an agent be like, hey, can you just listen, go look, if you do find something, especially if it has a cancellation policy, just book it for me, please, because like I know that it's hard to find accommodations at CES, and I would love to have some extra help. A robot out there basically scouring, all available options and making sure that I don't, like, nothing slips through the cracks. So anyway, I actually think travel, regardless of what people think about, say, using it to book plane tickets, it's that in particular is such a multivariate, multi-step, multi-ingredient process of flights across multiple airlines, times. Do you want to direct? Do you want to change planes somewhere? Hotels and accommodations, transport. Like, there's like so many variables. And the fact, and this kind of gets back to the semantics, is travel is another one where I feel like the commerce part of agentic commerce, sometimes the definition of that is taken to be like very narrow, that like an agent, the way you put it, Andrew, sort of has to independently take a path to purchase all the way to its consummation. Travel's kind of an interesting one because there might be some money changing hands, but there's like cancellation policies and you can change things. And so it's like, well, now you really do get into some semantics about what does commerce mean? Was it the reservation that was the commerce? Was capturing the credit card charge right after you check out? Was that the commerce? And so I do think we get off into some semantic Neverland. But Andrew, I did love the point that you made about just sort of an agent being kind of an independent actor that can take a sequence of tasks up to its kind of end state. That's certainly how I see it in the world of like ad tech, martech, SaaS, etc. I don't necessarily kind of apply that strict of a definition when it comes to like helping people shop.
Can we call this episode Semantic Neverland? That's an awesome term.
This is what we all do all day. This is our business.
When this debate first ignited, it was funny because everyone's like, let's stop debating semantics. And I was sitting there saying, like, I think we kind of need to, or why do we even have this conversation in the first place?
Yeah, we got to debate the semantics first and foremost. And then we go off into Semantic Neverland. Okay, so last couple of things I want to touch on here. Let's assume agentic commerce does become a thing. Let's just, make that leap of faith. What do advertisers, retailers, commerce, folks need to be, especially, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Andrew. Like, what do they need to be thinking about? What do they need to get ahead of? Like, my immediate thought here is, if agentic commerce becomes a thing, commerce media collapses because now all the data, the starting point for shopping and commerce is AI. And now OpenAI is like, okay, now we're ready for ads because everyone's buying everything on ChatGPT and starting their journey here. And we are going to crush this advertising thing and crush all of these retail media businesses. So just, playing that out a little bit, like how should retailers, advertisers, et cetera, be tackling that potential future?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest, shortest answer is engaging or starting to learn the basics of geo or whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, just understanding the dynamics of referral traffic. This idea that the traffic is going to go away, I don't buy into at all. If it were true, right, we've had lots of cycles of introducing commerce or buy buttons to every platform imaginable, and consumers have voted already, and they've said, I don't want it. Google Shopping, right? It does not exist. People like Google for the searching aspect. It influences the path to purchase 100%, but they're not going to buy that way. On social media platforms, I'm thinking back to Facebook Shops, right? This was a few years ago. Everyone thought that was going to be this big thing, and they went to market with an announcement with 20-some D2C brands, pretty well-known retailers and brands that were supposedly, building these storefronts on Facebook, but consumers never bought in any material way on that platform. And so now it just became an extra channel to manage and to, figure out what you need to do technically to build this storefront, all this stuff. It's like all this front end work for nothing. And so that's the moment I think we're in now, is everyone's saying, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do a million different things, invest wholly in this channel right now. And then they're going to be like, great, I built this all for this channel. And then they just get this little trickle of dollars coming in. It just wasn't worth it. So my advice is just wait it out. Let the consumer drive you. If a consumer behavior really starts to gravitate in that direction, you're not going to miss out on anything but, marginal dollars at this point. I just don't think you can waste a lot of time, energy, and investment on the front end. Meanwhile, there's a huge opportunity cost for dollars that are there right now that you're not taking. So just be patient. And I'll be the first one. Listen, I could be wrong here. I'll be the first one to admit it if I'm wrong about the consumer behavior taking off. But I will tell you this, even if I'm wrong, you're not going to lose out if you're just a little bit patient.
Andrew, can I play back what you said to make sure that I understood it, and definitely for our listeners? Were you kind of saying that organic AI search does matter and it is something worth focusing on now, but sort of paid or integration based or native AI shopping is not as important because you're not as convinced that that will turn into a thing, and you pointed out Facebook shops, etc.
I don't believe in instant checkout. I think the buy button version, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to take off in any material way. I've just seen it too many different times. And even the upside. So like the best version of that, I guess, would be TikTok Shop. Like that's something. But agentic commerce has been characterized as this, unbelievable revolution in shopping. And if I'm like the bull case to me is, social commerce, I don't know. I don't think most retailers should be investing a ton in that, or at least wait until it takes off a bit more.
Myles, do you have any final words of wisdom for buyers, for marketers, for retailers?
Oh man, keep an eye on what actual everyday people are doing. Which, Andrew, you pointed out some statistics about how people's search behavior, research behavior, possibly some shopping behaviors are changing. I think that's often what gets lost in a lot of the industry discourse. So we talk about more of the back end tech and then less about just what everyday people are doing. They're the ones who buy all the shit.
Yes, follow the normies. Follow the normies. One last point I want to make just on what should retail media buyers do. At this moment in time, I would say pay only a modicum of attention to this and instead pay a lot more attention to markets that are there right now and emerging in a way that's real. So if I'm buying on retail media, start thinking about investing in performance TV. Like that's going to happen. We're at a moment now with, Amazon now integrated with basically every ad-supported platform for content. That's going to be a big deal. 2026 is going to be a year for that. And then the other one is we're finally starting to see the rise of in-store digital media. It's breaking through. It's getting real with major retailers getting into the mix. Huge mega opportunity. And this is where 85% of sales still happen in stores. Like, this is where I want people to zoom out and like, let's be marketers again. Because I see a lot of retail media ad buyers talking themselves out of performance TV because the ROAS doesn't pencil out. Well, yeah, it's premium media. All else equal, like high CPM equals low ROAS. It doesn't mean it's not working. You're not measuring it right. And then in-store media, I'm like, you're telling me that good quality creative, right at the moment of decision, where 85% of sales are happening, like how does this argument not resonate with a marketer?
But
it's because we're not being marketers anymore.
Andrew, there's nothing to click. Then there's nothing.
Right, exactly.
What is the agency, the buyer, going to report on if they can't report clicks?
Also, to your point, Andrew, a little company called Pinterest this week bought a company called tvScientific, and so they're totally listening to you, and they're aligned with what you're saying. My final kind of point here is, I think where I net out on this is like, we actually agree, like we disagree on semantics a little bit, but we actually agree on what people should be doing and making of this whole thing. Like, I agree. I think the credit card aspect, like the final kind of I want to make this purchase thing, I think that's either going to take a while or, it may never happen. But I do think, to your point, like people should be investing in geo and AEO and AIO and thinking about the importance of AI assisted shopping. And that's where I think we are really kind of netting out on the same page here. So, well, thank you. This was awesome. Andrew, thanks for coming on and sharing your insights and your expertise. Myles, thanks as always for being my fearless co-host. And we'll see you again on the next episode of the AI Edge podcast.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was fun.